Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. This is going to be our best 10 movies of 2016 countdown, which me and Tim have, slaved over. We have sat and we have debated, we have decided what the best 10 are. This is a little bit different to if you've seen the list that me and Connor did for TV, where me and Connor are very in sync. There's a couple of picks here that are just for Tim or just for me, and we had to argue and fight for where they were on the list. But we came up with this, our definitive top 10 horror movies of 2016, which, a couple of qualifiers. All 10 movies are movies that we both seen. And we cover.
I thought you were going to say the first one was that it had to be a movie.
It had to be a movie, that's true. It had to be
So,
2016, and it had to
yeah.
be a horror movie. Yes, these are all rules that they had to abide by. But yeah, they're all movies that we both seen, and we both also covered all of them on the channel. So you can go to the playlist, Streams After Midnight, and find the reviews of all these if you want to get into spoilers, because we're not going to do spoilers here, keeping this spoiler free, so that you can, if you like the sound of some of them you've not seen, kind of thing, you can go and see them without being spoiled. There'll be links in the corner to some of them, but not all of them, because it does limit me to 5 links in the corner, so you can't get all 10, unfortunately. But I'll link what I can there. But otherwise, go to the playlist and you can find the rest. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into Screams After Midnight's top 10 horror movies of 2016. Number 10 is The Monster. The Monster tells the story of a mother and daughter who have a very awkward relationship. The mother is very immature, doesn't really look after her properly, and generally is kind of a neglectful mother. And the daughter's kind of more grown up as a result. She kind of has to take care of herself. And it's on the trip between states as she's driving her daughter to her biological father's house because she's going to leave her there. The car breaks down in the middle of the road, middle of the night, pouring of rain, and there's a monster in the woods coming to get them. And it's most of the movies them in the car, monsters outside. The awareness of the danger kind of slowly builds up, and we also have flashbacks throughout the movie as to their relationship and what they go through. Now this is very much my pick. Tim was not particularly fond of this one. I was the one who fought for this to get on the list. I loved this movie. I thought all the stuff with the mother and daughter and building their relationship made me care more about the horror stuff. The actual monster coming for them had more of an impact because I cared about those two characters, and a lot of it thematically linked about what their relationship was, and is the monster a metaphor for their relationship, and it had a bit more going for it than just there's a monster and there's cannon fodder for them to kill and that's it. There was a bit more to it than that, and I thought it was a very tight movie. I thought it told its story well. Some fantastic looking shots. It really, despite the fact that it's mostly on the one location with them in the car and the road outside the car, it constantly looks great. Whenever there's headlights on and you see it going through the rain and the movements of the monster in the background. Mostly practical effects in the monster as well. Very little CG, which makes it feel kind of fresh in 2016. And
Oh, definitely.
no, I thought the acting from both the mother and daughter was pretty good too. So no, I would recommend The Monster. Number 9 is Hush, which is a film about a deaf woman who is stalked by a home invader. It's a home invasion movie where this deaf woman can't hear them. So first of all, there's some great shots and creepy moments of him walking around behind her. But once she's aware of the situation, it becomes a game of cat and mouse with when one person has this disability. And it really plays up with that, and it plays up with this, creepy guy on the outside, her on the inside, and it is this game of cat and mouse throughout the whole thing, and it's a very sort of one night of horror. It maybe falters a little bit because I think the killer loses a bit of his mystique kind of early on because he loses his mask and it becomes less interesting from his point of view.
I'd say that's the one big flaw of the movie, but everything else about it is really spot on.
Yeah.
Really good premise.
Yeah, it's a really good premise. I think the actress who plays the deaf woman does a really great job
Oh,
of
yeah.
how she reacts to things based on her disability. She's also a very smart character who, in horror movies you often, we've got a video upcoming this week of the top 10 worst horror movies of the year, and one of our complaints through almost all 10 of those entries is how stupid the characters are. Whereas here, this
Yeah.
character, she's constantly trying to do things that make sense. She's trying to like use the internet to call for help, use the phone to call for help. She's trying to like, oh, if that's not working, then what can I do with this? I can't hear him coming, so I have to back myself into a corner so I can see him coming, kind of thing. Like she's
Yeah.
constantly doing things that make sense given the situation. She's constantly trying to do things that will help her situation, and
It's just very capable.
yeah, she's very capable despite her disability. So it's very empowering in that sense that she's not completely helpless, but she makes the best of what she can do.
Yeah.
And because of that, you care about her more because she feels more like a real person who's trying to think her way out of the situation. And it's against these impossible odds because it is a killer and she can't hear him coming. Number 8 is The Wailing, which is a Korean film about a small Korean town where the arrival of this Japanese man and a lot of creepy murders in the town set the main character, who's the detective, try to investigate what's going on, especially when the creepy incidents kind of directly tie into his daughter, his young daughter, and he has to try and fight and figure out what's going on. It's very creepy, very ghost-like. This was very much a Tim pick. I was very mixed on this movie. Tim, on the other hand, loved it, so I'll let Tim explain why it's here.
I really loved it. I thought it was a great movie. I love the location. It looks really good, and there's just a very great sense of creepiness all throughout it.
Sense of dread, I think I would use as the...
Yeah,
I just,
I will,
this is right from the get-go, you feel this, like, there's something ominous going on here that we can't explain.
yeah. Also, though, I think there are like legitimate kind of like some creepy, disturbing stuff. I thought, and yeah, it's the big complaint you had was the length. It is definitely a long movie, probably the longest movie on the list. But for me, I really didn't feel the length that much. I was invested in all the characters and the situation, and again, I just really like being in that world and and like that kind of creepy setting.
Yeah, and it does build up a mythology over the course of the movie, and it leaves you towards the end with that ambiguity of what really kind of happened, and you can speculate, and there's a lot to talk about after the movie's done.
Yeah, definitely. And this is actually just went up on Netflix recently, so it's also easy to track down. I'd highly recommend checking it out. I think, even if maybe you don't like some of the story and stuff, I think it is still a beautiful looking movie. Like the cinematography and everything on it is great.
Number 7 is Southbound. Now, this was one of a few anthology movies that came out this year, and this is one where there's a lot of ambiguity throughout the movie. It's answered by the end, what's going on, but they actually all share a thematic link. And each of the story does involve the highway in some way. It's usually people on a road trip. Either they're on the run from something, or they're looking for something, or they're just caught up in an incident because something happens on the road. They are all thematically linked, which I really like. Some of the stories are, of course, better than others. And I think the reason why it works overall is because there is this sense of there's this greater thing going on that we don't quite understand right away. And there is kind of like a moral compass behind the stories that works really well. And for me, like, my favourite story is there's a story in the middle of the movie where a character has to help someone who's dying.
Oh yeah.
And they have to like go to like a hospital in this like abandoned town. He's getting instructions from someone who he believes is a doctor over the phone, and I really love that story. But all of them really build up the characters and why are they in this situation? What are they doing here? What is the thematic link between them all? Which for me is what maybe sets it apart between other anthologies, is that even though a couple of stories might be a little bit weaker than some of the others,
Yeah.
they all tie together in a way. They all have a purpose that kind of links them all.
Yeah, this is a really good anthology movies, and I think we've talked about on the podcast before about how we're both pretty big fans of anthology stuff. This one, it's really good. All the stories feel really tight. There's one towards the end that I wasn't crazy about, but it still wasn't necessarily bad. Like there wasn't any that were complete clunkers for me, and I actually think. Because of the nature of the story, it actually you get a lot out of it after rewatching it. Because I'd seen this twice. I saw it once in the theater, which I'm not gonna lie. Like I was a little like confused and like a little wishy-washy about it, and then but after thinking about it and then talking about it with my girlfriend, and then going back and watching it a second time for the podcast, I went from just being kind of like, oh, okay, it's kind of cool, to being like, oh, I really love this, and yeah, going back and rewatching it, I would highly recommend. I feel like you get a lot out of that.
Number 6 is The Conjuring 2, which of course is a sequel to The Conjuring that came out a few years ago. James Wan's directing once again. We have the same Ed and Elizabeth Warren back as the main characters, and it's them coming to England to investigate what was referred to as the British Amityville.
Amityville.
Yeah, Amityville horror. It's a small low income household, lots of kids. Ghost is there tormenting one of the girls, and they come to investigate it. I think what works, obviously the ghost stuff works really well. James Wan's a really good horror director. There's a lot of great creepy stuff and scares and stuff like that. What really surprised me about this one, especially even compared to the first one, is they did a really good job making us care about the characters, especially the two leads, Ed and Lorraine. They have this arc where a lot of the movie's about them trying to accept that, maybe like one of them might be in trouble, maybe one of them will die in one of these missions and one of these, these hauntings, and they're trying to like deal with that. And there's this sweet story in the middle about them like loving each other, which you don't usually get in a horror movie. There's not usually like a core like sweet story about marriage in there, but there is. And even the way they help the kids and they try to make them feel better. There's a scene in the movie where he like sings Elvis. He grabs a guitar and sings to them, and there's these really sweet moments dotted throughout. But then there's also really creepy stuff. There's a fantastic scene when they're trying to channel the ghost, the demon, through the girl, and you hear the guy's demonic voice coming out of the girl, but it's out of focus in the background, and we stay in Ed the entire time. And there's lots of these great film-making little feats where he keeps doing these great little set pieces throughout the film, but you care about the characters. So as much as the film's maybe a touch too long, it's just over 2 hours, which is kind of long for a movie like this. It does pack it with so much stuff that should be there and makes sense. And then on top of that, the English council house setting makes it feel different from most like American ghost story movies, because you have a different setting, lots of different characters with different accents, and it just feels like it's from a different perspective than usual. But you have these core characters that come in and make it feel familiar at the same time.
I know one thing that's actually really cool. I went and did some research on this because it's based on a true story, and James Wan and the whole production team did a fantastic job of recapturing the look and the feel of that time period, and like recreating the house. And
it felt like the 70s, like the entire time, like
yeah. And even if you look at like some of the incidents that were caught on tape and stuff, they recreated like a lot of those in a like really really well done way.
Yeah, just
like a lot of
obviously forget the whole based on a true story thing. Yeah. There was like one small moment probably that it's based on. Just forget that most all the stuff that happens in the last act of this movie did not happen in real life. It just didn't.
Yeah.
Also, the movie gave us the evil looking creepy nun, which is actually like one of the most iconic horror images of the year, I think, because she looks proper creepy. And what's even more amazing is that she was added quite late. Like that was like I don't know if it was a reshoot, but it was like a really late addition.
There was a scene with her in the painting that I really liked.
Yeah. Really good scares. James Wan does a really good job of building up to his jump scares, so they don't feel cheap. They feel like, no, this is a good jump scare. There's not too many of them, but when they are there, they're built to in such a way that it doesn't feel cheap. It feels like, this is the punctuation. It's like a joke. You have the setup and you have the punchline, and the jump scare is the punchline. So if you set it up properly, it lands, and you, in this case, scream or jump or whatever, as opposed to a laugh and a joke.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, it doesn't feel cheap. It's deserved.
Number 5 is Don't Breathe, which is the new film from the same director of the Evil Dead reboot from a couple of years ago. Jane Levi's even back as well. She's the lead star. And this is another high concept thing. We had a movie earlier on about a deaf woman being the target. This movie's about the villain being a blind man. And it's a group of thieves who break into this house looking for, the fortune that he supposedly has. And the blind man, played by Stephen Lang, turns out to be like such a like paranoid military vet like freak that he is able to be like the most terrifying thing ever. So we have a lot of scenes where the characters are trying to quietly sneak around and not get his attention, and it leads to a lot of great tense sequences. And then the movie on top of that spirals into even more absurdity that we didn't really expect. There's a great night vision sequence, and when I say night vision, the characters don't use night vision, but we have night vision on the camera so we can see them, because there's a scene where it takes place entirely in pitch blackness, and it works really well. There's a lot of shadows in play, there's a lot of things. So there's a lot of inventive filmmaking. It's also a movie that has rules, where the house is like, got bars over the windows, it's got all these different things. It sets up clearly on where the sensor for an alarm is, where this is, where that is, and you know where they're trying to get to. You always know what the characters are trying to get access to as the movie's going. On top of that, the movie does open up, and there's actual legit reveals like halfway through that I didn't see coming, and it completely turns the whole premise on its head.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I was most impressed about with it is a very specific premise, which is good, but you get the feeling like, it could get old fast, but they find so many interesting ways to keep it going and adding things and then twisting things around to keep it interesting that, yeah, you're feeling tense all the way throughout, but you're like so interested and focused and want to know what is going to happen next. It really like keeps you on like the edge of the seat, like right up until the very end of the movie. The cat's chewing on my wire.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those things where you're so into it, you're so invested in what's going on, where when the character steps on a floorboard that creaks, or when the blind man finds evidence that they're in the house, like, and your heart kind of sinks. And they're obviously very morally kind of dubious characters, because they are breaking into the house. So some are obviously worse than others, but the ones who are, like, aren't as awful, that you become to care about them over the course of the movie, and you realise, okay, they were doing something they weren't meant to, but they don't necessarily deserve the crazy that's coming from them. I think it's a movie where you start off in a certain place in terms of who you align yourself with and who you're rooting for, and by the end you're completely flipped around, and you're rooting for different people, you're thinking differently from the way you were at the start of the movie. And it uses the house very well. The house is almost a character in and of itself, the way it has all these nooks and crannies, and the bars and the windows, the giant basement with all the aisles between all the shelves and things like that. There's a lot that goes into it. I think it's a really tight, very, very tight, well-made, put-together horror movie that's based on a very simple premise, but that premise leads to a lot of great scares. Number 4 is Darling. Now this is very much my pick. Tim was not as keen on this one, so I will take the reins here. Darling is a black and white movie that kind of homages back to Roman Polanski's Repulsion, in that it's about one singular woman who seems to be going mad as she takes a job to be a caretaker for this hotel. It's kind of up in the air, it's very ambiguous. Is she going mad, or is there actually like voices talking to her kind of thing? It's very open-ended, but it's very, very stylistic. Takes its time with a lot of its sequences. You get a lot of really beautiful black and white imagery. You get a lot of really harsh like music scores coming in, and it's kind of like, and it's all kind of hinging on both the cinematography and her performance. Her performance, the lead character, she very expertly like shifts between like awkward, like uncomfortable, and like raving lunatic in some cases. You can see the anger boiling up. It's all in the eyes. There's moments where she just looks at the camera and you just kind of sink, because you're kind of almost in a trance, because you feel like she's watching you. You feel like she's looking. It's kind of like that moment at the end of Psycho, where Anthony Perkins looks at the camera and you feel it. So on top of all that, yeah, looks gorgeous, very, very beautiful black and white movie, very stylized, very punchy, very to the point. I think if you're a fan of the more sort of art house style of horror movie, where it is a sort of slower build and it's about a sort of spiral into madness, I think if that sounds appealing to you, I think you'd get into it. But you feel her isolation the entire time, because she's a very lonely character who stays to herself. Another character tries to talk to her when she's outside. You feel awkward, you feel like her, like this is uncomfortable. Why are they talking to me? There's a very good job of putting you in her shoes, which is a very weird feeling, and I think that's the point, is that you kind of feel the madness. You feel it yourself. You feel it spiraling. So I would highly recommend Darling. Number 3 is The Witch. So it's about a family who's ostracised from society and they have to live out on their own, out in the middle of nowhere, they're near woods, it's the olden times, they're working hard, it's like a constant fight to have like food, to feed the entire family. You've got the older daughter, you've got a couple of middle kids, you've got a baby, and I think one of the complaints you might have about this is that you might want subtitles because the accents are so authentic that they're thick from the time period, they're hard to understand a lot of the time. And
They specifically use like actual dialogue from like journals
yeah,
from
yeah.
that time period.
It's very much a slow build of tension throughout the entire movie where you feel the characters like terrified of the unknown, and they believe in things like witches and stuff like that right away. They don't even have to be convinced. They believe in the devil, invading them, and it's about paranoia and suspicion. And is one of the family members taken over by something, or aren't they? And obviously early on in the movie, the baby vanishes. And that's in the trailer. It's not a spoiler, and it's kind of the setup for the slow spiraling of like dread that sort of goes through it. It's a very very close character piece as well. It's about the seduction, perhaps, of people of evil. I think is another way of putting it in.
Yeah, I think there's like there's themes of like seduction, paranoia. That's one of my favorite things about it is when you hear about like the Salem witch trials, and it's kind of like how could that like get out of hand so easily? And I think this is like a perfect example of like escalation, where you go from like, oh, like this is how these people live and can believe in these things, and how they can go from, being this tight knit family to, starting to accuse people and getting paranoid and everything. So very, very solid.
Number 2 is Train to Busan, which is the second Korean movie on this list. It is a zombie movie which is set primarily on a train. A group of characters are on the train, of course. Zombie outbreak happens, and the idea is this is maybe one of the safer places, even though there's certain cars on the train that are filled with zombies. It leads to a very sort of almost action horror movie experience where you've got the main character of the dad who's protecting his young daughter, and then there's a sort of ragtag group of other characters who sort of end up forming with them. This movie ends up being really exciting, has a lot of great set piece moments where they have to sneak past certain groups of zombies, they have to do this and do that. There's also really strong characters, there's a very strong moral centre as well, there's a good message, there's a good social commentary that comes out of this film as it goes on, like most of the great zombie movies have. You have really strong characters that you care for, that you like, that you want to succeed. There's also one character who is one of the best villains of the last couple of years in horror movies, where you're determined to see them die. You want them to die so much, and you're rooting for it. And he causes so much problems for all the good characters that you hate them so much. It's probably been a while since I've liked a zombie movie this much.
Yeah, I feel like we've been so overloaded with zombies movies the last like 10 or more years or something, that it really takes a lot for a zombie movie to stand out. So I didn't really expect much going into this other than, oh, it might be a fun zombie movie, but it really exceeded all of my expectations. Yeah, all the characters are great. You really start to care for them. The action's great. They, figure out new stuff to do that we haven't really seen in like other zombie movies before. Yeah, a lot of good action. The zombies looked cool. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
Number 1 is The Invitation, which is a movie starring Logan Marshall Green, and it's another film that focuses very much on paranoia and slow build. There's a lot of good slow build movies this year. The plot of this one is that him and his now girlfriend, are actually going to a house party that's been thrown by his ex and her new husband/boyfriend. And it's a lot of his old friends, like him and his ex had like a similar group of friends, like they all knew each other from maybe college or high school or whatever. And they've not seen her in a long time, but they've been invited out here. And the film kind of it's very much like a slow thriller for a lot of the way. It turns into more of a horror movie as it goes on. But there's this constant sense of dread throughout as he's sort of, realising that things aren't quite what they seem. Is there stuff going on? Is there, like, malicious intent from his ex and her boyfriend, and it introduces these elements that they might be involved in something, but we're not really sure if he's been paranoid. And that's actually one of the great strengths of the movie, is that for most of the film, and I won't spoil whether or not he is or he isn't, but there is a very ambiguous sense of, is he actually noticing real things that are a threat, or is he just paranoid? Is he the one that's disturbed?
I'm usually not someone who really cares too much about spoilers. Like, I prefer to stay away from them, but I also don't get too bent out of shape if I, hear them. But this is one that really, really, it's you don't want to know like anything about it going in.
Yeah.
It's the less you know, the better, and it kept me guessing so much throughout the movie. Like, I kept flip flopping between like, oh, I think I know what's going on. Oh, I guess I was wrong. Oh, I have no idea. Oh, I think this person's this or this person's that. Like, it's really, really engaging.
And you get really cynical with it as well, because you kind of keep going, oh, well, it's leaning more towards this, so I think it's the opposite. And you keep flip-flopping like that, and you're trying to outsmart it and try to think 2 steps ahead. And the great thing about it is most of it's like a group of friends talking about the old times. There's some awkward moments. There's, they have a dinner party, and there's awkwardness between dialogue and cases. But some of it is very much just, them trying to make small talk, but and that's why I like it so much. I think there's so much that comes out of the small moments, like how does someone react to a certain line of dialogue, how does the ex react to this, how do, when they tell them all these new things they're into, like, I think the direction is so strong, and the script is so strong, in the way that it plays with all these small moments, and just has things just off where you could explain it away, but maybe there isn't something you could explain away. Then you have the whole thing is all from his perspective. So is it him being unreliable? Do we think it's more creepy because we're seeing it from his delusioned perspective? It plays it back and forth, and the movie does a good job of that, and it keeps you on your toes, and you're constantly thinking, what is the horror here? Something is wrong, but is it wrong with them or is it wrong with him?
And a big complaint we had about a lot of our worst movies of the year were like just these archetype characters that would make no sense if they were like hanging out together. All the characters in this felt very real, and they felt like they had a history. It just felt like friends catching up.
They felt like real people. Obviously, the ex and her new boyfriend felt a little bit different, but that was kind of the point, is they'd went away and they've not seen them in a while. It's been a couple of years and they've come back, so they feel a little bit different, and it feels like they're introducing these new dynamics to the group. But the rest of the group, you can tell they all know each other. They have like small little in-jokes, they have these little ways they address each other that they feel like real people. The characters are really strong.
Yeah, it wasn't a focus. Like, it didn't feel like they're not big, exaggerated, over the top characters. Like, oh no, these are like normal people.
Yeah.
I thought that did a great job of that, and like you bring up, there's like a little weirdness between like the two main characters, but then that it does such a good job though of building the tension and making you think like, oh, like, is this why there's some weirdness in the room, or is it because there's something more going on? And obviously like a lot about all this stuff kind of going on, and the weirdness and the tension ramping up, and like having all these ideas about what's going to go on, and then it's kind of hard to think like, oh, like, would the end kind of live up to that? And I thought the ending was great. Like, it it never really like everything, it like follows through, and it's so enjoyable from start to finish.
Well, that's been our top 10 best horror movies of 2016. Of course, I think some of the bigger takeaways here, looking at this year, I think this was the year that VOD became like such a big part of movies, especially horror movies. I feel like half of this list are movies that went straight to VOD, went to VOD the same day that they went to like limited theatre runs, but it felt like this year, there was a time when straight to VOD meant, oh, it was bad, kind of like direct-to-video did, whereas here it feels like, no, there was a lot of great movies, like Hush went straight to Netflix, Invitation was VOD the same day as the theatre, Darling was VOD, Southbound was VOD, again, some of them had limited runs, some of them didn't, but so many of them like came to us through VOD that I feel like, oh, you know what, now it's kind of like, no, for low budget horror movies, that's actually a really good place to find these things now. Like, it's not, they don't need theatre runs anymore.
Yeah, and I think just the last couple of years we've really seen the rise of like the indie horror movie.
Again,
And I Yeah,
yeah.
like and it's funny like if you look at like our best and worst list, I think like most on the best, with a few exceptions, were like independent movies.
Yeah,
While
obviously, like Conjuring 2, Don't Breathe,
yeah,
were the real kind of sort of studio
mhm,
films. The rest were all independent or foreign or VOD. Like, yeah, you're right. Whereas if you look at the worst list, and most of them are studio horror films. It's kind of an obvious trend there. Not all, of course. There's a couple of VOD ones on that as well.
yeah,
Not to spoil what they are, because that's the next video coming up from us. I think that's the big takeaway, though. I think that's really what I was seeing, and I think it was another strong year. I think we came out, well, I mean, I think when we made the shortlist for this, we had like 13, 14 movies.
yeah,
A couple we didn't agree on, we argued for and against. But it was a
mhm,
really strong year where we could easily have a top 10. And we also easily had a worst 10 as well, which you'll see in the next video. But you always get those. There's always a worst 10 horror movies, easily. But best 10, I feel like a couple of years ago you would have struggled to get to 10 that you really felt passionate
yeah,
about to say, these are 10 great horror movies this year. Whereas this year, and last year as well, I think these last couple of years have been really, really good to us. And that's great, it's great, and hopefully that continues throughout 2017. So, yeah, let us know what your favourite horror movies of the year are in the comments below. Agree, disagree with us, that's all cool. Just, let us know what your picks are. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. It helps us out a lot if you do. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.